All right. Well, welcome all. Happy November. Good morning to each of you. And welcome to the November Tribal Resilient Learning Network information session. I'm Melinda Chase. I'm one of the co-leads. I recognize many names on here, and it's been quite a while since I've hosted one of these information sessions that we have monthly. So I'm happy to be here today. And I'm looking forward to our guests, and hopefully you are too. We have a couple of reminders for you, though. Please put yourself on mute. And if you don't have a dedicated mute number, hit *6, and that should mute yourself. Also, if you're using your audio, just make sure that you can be unmuted during Q&A and answer questions at that time. You can also enter your introductions. We'd like to hear who's on and hear a little bit about where you're from, where you're located at, who you're with. So please enter that into the chat and know that you can use that for Q&A. We'll be monitoring that. And you just heard that the session is going to be recorded. So it'll be available in the next couple of days on our webpage at the Alaska Climate Adaptation Science Center. So I'm happy to welcome you all today. We have several of our team members on here that are helping us to move through the slides and monitor the chat. So we'll go ahead and get started. Next slide, Lori. Oh, maybe, there we go. So as all of you who are in the US, and especially those of us who are in Alaska, we're calling in and online from various of our own homelands as Indigenous people. I'm fortunate to live and work on the Lower Tanana Delay lands at the International Arctic Research Center, which is based in Fairbanks on the Trothyida campus. And we have additional staff that work and have offices both in the Dena'ina land down in Anchorage at the university, or the Alaska Pacific University, at the USGS office. And then we have additional staff in Quinnahook and Shaktoolik. And you're also welcome to share where you are calling in from in terms of traditional lands. So don't get in. Next slide. So many of you who have been on here before are familiar that we're part of the Alaska Tribal Resilience Network. Hopefully we're becoming a resource for all of you who are on. Know that we have many dynamic team members. Some of them are listed here. A few of them are on today. I know Jolene is on and Lori's on. Megan helped set this up. So just know that all of these folks here that are listed are resources and are listed on our website. Next slide. And if you want to continue to join in or need additional support, you can, of course, check the website out that I just cited, continue to join the information sessions, and then definitely submit any activities that you may have, or watch for the e-bulletin, or ask to be added to our e-bulletin, and know that technical assistance is available through the learning website, or excuse me, through the learning network through us. Thank you. The next slide. So here's what we're here for today. I'm really excited that we have several great guests with us today. We have been focusing on landslides in the last couple of weeks with some of our team members that have been traveling in Southeast, and maybe some of those folks that they met with recently are in the information session today. But we have 3 guests with us. Kenneth Weitzel, who is with the Central Council of Tlingit and Haida, and he'll be our first guest. And then we have Mort Larsen, who's with the Landslide Hazard Program with the state of Alaska. Department of Natural Resources. And then our third guest is Stefan Slaughter, who's with USGS, and he's the program coordinator for the Landslides hazard. And you can definitely see that we're having impacts like this, and to me, they're pretty astounding impacts, and to have to witness and go through them, from what we can see, has been a pretty hard to take in at how fast these things can happen. And so with that, Kenneth, I'll turn it over to you, and I think the next slide is yours.
Melinda, thank you very much. And good morning, everyone. It's so good to have so many people invested in this subject matter. My name is Kenneth Weitzel. I am Tlingit, Chalk, Tekwedi, Hootsit, Daktentan Yadi from Huna Kawu. And back in 2017, I was hired by my tribe, Tlingit and Haida, to write the climate change adaptation plan and a template for the 16 other tribes in Southeast. And back in that time, there wasn't even data for Southeast other than the isostatic adjustment or post-glacial rebound, stream temperature monitoring, all the things like that were only being conducted in central or northern Alaska. So even in the climate change adaptation plan, there's not really any local data. Since then, we've discovered and understood that we've turned into a less snow, more rain regime, which has many, many effects. And the less snow, more rain is just one of the effects out of many. Our climate change adaptation plan was written with culturally sensitive resources in mind. And our top three were salmon, cedar, and shellfish. And salmon is our life, and it's been changing for decades, and the change is increasing. The regime change with less snow, more rain affects spawning streams. It affects the water that they need during the spawning season. They don't have that reservoir up in the mountains anymore like they used to. Our cedar, yellow cedar specifically, has been affected because of the less snow that acts as a blanket to the immature root system. And that's what's been that's one of the vectors causing die-offs. And shellfish, one of our old sayings is, when the tide goes out, the table's set. That's not the case anymore, because shellfish have become poisonous, with paralytic shellfish poisoning increasing, and their life cycles being disrupted by ocean changes in chemistry and temperature. We're hoping to start a climate change 2 with help from BIA and any other agencies we can get to incorporate the new local data and expand on the phenomenon that's causing these changes, specifically the atmospheric rivers that are coming in. At first, it wasn't a precipitation change. It was just a regime change between less snow, more rain. Now It's less snow, more rain, and occasionally a whole bunch of rain. And anyone who's spent much time in Southeast Alaska knows what rainforest rain is like. It's chilled out like Hawaiian rain every morning. Lately, we've been having the torrents of rain where you can't see across the parking lot. You can't see it out. You can't see out your windshield if you're driving. And that's a clear sign of the atmospheric rivers. And we've learned so much since then. Next slide, please. And like I was saying, those are our primary cultural concerns, but now we'd like to expand further into the scientific concerns, mitigation, adaptation, emerging opportunities, if any, and incorporating the new science or the updated science, the more expanded science, like the atmospheric rivers and its effects. I believe that's all I have. If anybody has any questions, if not, next slide, please.
Oh, I think, great, Kenneth. That's our ending slide there. So maybe you can pull that off, Lori. And thank you, Kenneth, for that that example. I mean, that sharing your adaptation plan, and highlighting the concerns. And we will have a Q&A at the end. I think it'll be it's just really telling in terms of having a 2016 climate adaptation plan and already in this short amount of time, to need to ready to update it again with more current information as we're seeing such profound changes. So I'm happy to introduce our next guest, which is Mort Larsen. And I shared previously that he's the Landslide Hazard Program Manager for the state of Alaska. So Mort, go ahead.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Excited to be here to chat with everybody about kind of the program that I've got going on. I'm Mort Larsen, work with the state of Alaska Department of Natural Resources within the Division of Geological and Geophysical Surveys. I run the Landslide Hazards program. We're a fairly new program. In fact, we just celebrated our 2-year anniversary back in September. Things that I'm going to be just covering is kind of this landslide mapping and assessment that we've got through a FEMA-funded projects that we're able to provide communities and boroughs with. So if just kind of some background, if people don't know DGGS's mission, I just want to kind of lay the roadmap here as we kind of move on to kind of get this in people's heads. Is our mission is to determine the potential of Alaskan land for production of metals, minerals, fuels, and geothermal resources, the locations of supplies of groundwater and construction material. And highlighted in there in yellow is my basis and the support of what I do. And the potential of geologic hazards to buildings, roads, buildings, and other installations and structures, protecting folks, infrastructure, and people. So what I'm going to be going over is kind of this FEMA, it's a FEMA cooperative technical partnership program that the state here at DGGS, we're able to get funding to be able to provide services for local communities, boroughs that are looking to improve their landslide hazard mitigation plans and kind of the steps that we have on that. Here's just some bullets that I put together that kind of gives you kind of an overview and kind of the goals behind the FEMA Cooperative Technical Partnership Program. I've got a link there at the bottom. The slide is hopefully available to folks. They can look into this, but I just want to kind of highlight kind of the big ones here. maximizing limited public funding for combining resources to align with state, local, regional, tribal, and territorial goals with FEMA's national objectives, leveraging partnership based on some of these risk maps are focusing on collaboration with state, tribal, and local entities. The goal is to hopefully increase public awareness. With that would hopefully equal action that reduce risk to life and property, providing outreach support, and delivering high quality hazard products. And the big one right here is increasing community resilience to hazards through communication and mapping efforts. So what does this look like? Like I mentioned there at the very beginning, our program, the Alaska Landslides Hazards Program, is new. We've got a cooperative agreement with the USGS. But our mission here at the Landslide Hazards Program is to map and assess landslides, understand and quantify landslide hazards, and improve geologic hazard communication and coordination with other agencies and communities. It's a big basis of the staple of our base on how we want to move forward with our program. The key motivations for these FEMA CTP grants that we get are landslide hazard mapping and assessment, continue populating our Alaska landslide inventory database. I'll go over that a little bit here in a few slides, and provide decision makers with critical information and data about landslide hazards. We're a non-regulatory system. We don't make decisions for folks, but we want to be able to provide major entities and communities and boroughs and decision makers with critical information to be able to move steps moving forward to protect their communities, and improving and developing long-term relationships. So our current FEMA CTP funded projects that we have going on right now, in fact, we're just wrapping up with our Haynes Borough one. It started back in September 22, just ended in September of this year. And some of the products that we produced from this study was these landslide inventory maps, shallow landslide susceptibility mapping, and channelized debris flow susceptibility mapping. And there's a reported investigation that goes along with these maps that describes our methods and our meanings behind this. Right now, we've got one with City of Cordova, where that'll end in March of 25 of next year. Same deliverables that we're working on the landslide part of things, but I've co-partnered with our snow avalanche guru on that, where he'll be developing some snow avalanche mapping and assessments for that area. And shortly after the Wrangell landslide that occurred, we are working with the borough there with folks that wanted this information, because we all know, living in Alaska, that our data is sparse. So we put in a FEMA CTP this last year and was granted some money to do this work for them. And it will include landslide inventory mapping, shallow landslide susceptibility mapping, and channelized debris flow susceptibility mapping. We also got a grant where I'll be hosting a geologic climate weather related disasters workshop. Proposed projects that we have that we've worked with our Region 10 FEMA rep for this next year is City of Valdez and Glacier View and Matanuska, and pretty much almost same kind of deliverables that we'll be looking at. Some resources that I really just kind of want to highlight to folks that I really recommend you have time to look at this, is that we've kind of adopted and used the protocol for when we do shallow landslide susceptibility mapping. And this is from the Oregon Department of Geology and Minerals, DOGAMI. They established these protocols back in 2009 or 12 for the shallow landslide susceptibility mapping. So we use their protocols on how we do that. We also use their protocols for channelized debris flow susceptibility mapping. There's a link for that. I do believe they came out with that publication back in 2022. And then there's just one for people's entertainment, or just kind of get an idea of how we go about mapping landslide inventory database systems. We've kind of got a protocol here at DGGS, but this is a great paper to kind of step people through the process of mapping landslides using LiDAR. So here's just a quick snapshot of what some of those mapping products look like. These are still in draft, so I can't really share the full final product on this, But the left-hand side is our landslide inventory. So this kind of gives you an idea of what that would look like. We got different symbology that means different type of landslides. And what this includes is just basically doing a landslide inventory mapping exercise that we look at LiDAR data, we look at aerial photo imagery, and we map this inventory. And the inventory is very big moving forward. The middle image there shows our shallow landslide susceptibility. And this is based on slope and geology on soil type. That kind of brick red color is more highly susceptibility as far as failure compared to the tan or the clear color. And that's based again on slope and the type of geology. And then over on the right-hand side, we got these channelized debris flow areas that we've identified potential debris flows where we've identified catchments. We see where the initiation can occur and the potential of the hazard. And that way you can identify potential risk in areas that you're concerned about. The landslide inventory database, just a quick scope on this. With the whole process behind what we're doing with these projects is really kind of build our landslide inventory database. It's basically compiled of all the landslides that have been mapped out there, previously mapped on geologic maps, and new landslides that are occurring that'll be fit into this database. So we're working on making this public here shortly. It's going through a protocol and a review here at DGGS that this information will be available to the public and to folks. So it's kind of a one-stop shop on that end, but something that we're continuously building. And here's just kind of our vision on this is right now, over the last year and a half, we've mapped over 10,000 landslides that have been mapped already on geologic maps and new landslides. And eventually what this database goes into, it goes into the US Geological, US landslide inventory database, where anybody can access that. Working with the USGS folks on making sure that we have the right geodatabase and schema set up on that. As everybody can see here, in Southeast, everything's red, and over on the left, there's not. That's Tongass National Forest's wonderful geodatabase, landslide geodatabase. So done a great job here in Southeast. So just to wrap things up, the FEMA CTP timeline is that they working with our FEMA CTP rep, Ren Lam, out of Region 10. Executive summaries get announced about around March. Executive summaries are due that July-ish, and then if funded, the funding comes out in September, October, and that funds DGGS to be able to do these services. So the procedures and services, what that entails is working with the local community, like we did with Haynes, to get a support letter that goes with the executive summary and identify areas of interest where they want to be able to do this analysis. And that'll determine the length of the project, a 1 to 2 year, maybe even 3 year. But that also determines the cost that it's going to be. And then with that, we have money that we're able to do community outreach and engagement, that we'll be able to go to the communities and chat about landslides. Things that I just want to mention, these are kind of just some highlighted limitations. There's multiple ones. This is a desktop exercise. There's no funding or money that goes and does field work. So LiDAR data is very important for us to be able to do this. During this, we can identify data gaps. That could be the aerial imagery or lack of LiDAR. Soil and geology is huge. There's areas that have great geology maps, some that don't, and that really kind of handcuffs us to making a good product. Susceptibility maps, like I said, are really heavily dependent on LiDAR data. And conversations I've had with other folks is these maps are not suitable for land use regulations or building code developments. They're just to kind of get the foot in the door and kind of get the next steps moving forward on that. And last thing I just want to end on is kind of the theme I'm using, Alaska landslides. We know that's challenging given the diverse landscape that we live in and the sparse data, but we have to be flexible to be able to move and figure those things out, but also be transparent amongst each other to figure out the best means moving forward. And I think with this gives us opportunities on how we can fix those problems and get people information about saving their lives and property. So at that, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mort. And maybe during our Q&A, we can circle back around. One of the things and our role here at the Tribal Learning Network is to be this link, right? And so oftentimes our agency folks and our scientists, we get caught up in acronyms, and like CTP, Mort, you lost me on that. Again, a lot of people are not familiar with some of the resources or funding or technical assistance we can get. So can you say what CTP is again, so people understand what that is in terms of it's a resource for assessment?
Yeah, you bet. It's the Cooperative Technical Partnership Program.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. That sounds good. And so maybe, Stephen, if you have those kind of acronyms, you can expand on them too. Again, this is new information for some of us. And so putting things in context, helping people to, I know we have folks here from Southeast that are, have experienced this. But as all Alaskans, if we are much more aware of, what each one of our regions are experiencing, I think it's important. It's important for the action that we could help one another on, especially in trying times. So, all right, Stephen, I'll turn it over to you, and
All right.
go right ahead.
Thank you, Lori, for getting my slide up for me. Hi, all. So I appreciate the invitation today to share with all of you the new Landslide grant program that is intended to reduce community landslide risk. I'm Stephen Slaughter, and I'm from the US Geological Survey, and I'm currently based in Golden, Colorado. Next slide, please. So a few relevant facts about the grant. This new grant program is competitive, and eligible applicants include state, territorial, local, and tribal governments. Our first round of grants was just last spring, and we received 15 applicants. It says 13 here, it's actually 15, which we narrowed to 9 and awarded a total of $1 million to those 9 applicants. This next round, we also have $1 million in federal assistance. Let's see, our request for proposals ask applicants to focus on hazard mapping, landslide education, landslide awareness, or coordination. I'll discuss these and give some examples in the next few slides. It's important to know that our grants are focused less on research and instead take successful landslide research and apply that to solve real world problems, which is probably what a lot of you are experiencing out there in Alaska as far as landslides. A few details about the grants. Awards range from $10,000 to $250,000 and can be used within a 12 to 24 month period of performance. Unfortunately, we only have $1 million of total assistance at this point, which doesn't really go very far for all these awards or all these applications we'll probably receive. There is a match. It's a 1-to-1 match, but this isn't required. It simply adds priority to your proposal. So for instance, if we have 2 proposals that are score equally by our peer review panel, the proposal that actually has a match will be essentially given 1 more point over the other proposal that doesn't have match. So it's not necessary to have match at all, but it helps add extra points to your proposal in the end. There are 3 guidance areas where applicants are suggested to focus their proposals, which I'll cover in the next few slides. So next slide, please. Thank you. So this area here, this is a guidance area we recommend folks to aim their proposals to, is 1 of 3. Is landslide hazard mapping and assessments. Hazard mapping is usually the best sort of first tool to assess community landslide risk and build resilience to landslides. Before any alerting system is established, a community should first understand where the greatest risk is, where the greatest landslide risk is, and where there is the least landslide risk, which may even be more important. So some examples of hazard maps include, let's see, one of my sliders went away. Mapping where landslides have occurred in the past, or inventory, and Mort showed a map of a landslide inventory. So those are those landslides that have occurred throughout history and before history. We identify using aerial photos and LiDAR, and we can map those. That's sort of like the basic information we need. The next sort of map is where landslides might start, or susceptibility. So think about, the big steep hillsides where Mort was showing those red and orange colors. Those are areas where landslides might start. And then finally, another hazard map that we think is really important is runout. This is where landslides might go. So think about, you have your susceptibility map, these areas up on the hillside that are red and orange. And then if a landslide does go, a runout map identifies those zones down below that may be impacted, where people live, where the schools are, maybe where they hunt and fish, and that sort of thing. Another area is collection of analysis of landslide loss data. And loss data is interesting. It identifies, how many lives are impacted by landslides and how much do landslides cost to community. This is a sort of bigger picture thing, but something we need to understand how landslides impact communities. So a great example of loss would be like, maybe a road that goes to a community nearby. You have a landslide, you have direct loss, which is the road being impacted, cleaning up the landslide and rebuilding the road. But then the indirect loss is the big one. That's where people can't drive back and forth. And so they can't, take their kids to daycare, or they can't go to school, or they can't get the fuel delivery. Those losses are significantly more, and we don't have a good grasp on that. So there's one area for grant proposals to work on. Next slide, please. Landslide planning and coordination. Reducing losses from landslides requires improved preparedness, landslide mitigation, and landslide response. And all this requires collaboration and coordination across various groups. So think about your emergency managers, your geologists, your tribal leadership, planners, land managers, and others. This guidance area aims to find ways to improve landslide response with planning, coordination, and teamwork among these different groups. In this first bullet, this can look like the development of a community response plan where groups develop guides and procedures to deal with landslide emergencies, maybe training community members to recognize the conditions that may trigger a landslide, all the way through to training first responders on how to safely respond to a landslide. Let's see the next major bullet. Consider the development of a working group that looks at land use and how land management practices with an eye towards landslides. An example might be develop rules on how best to manage timberlands and protect those slopes from future landslides, or where to avoid building homes, hospitals, and schools, so to reduce that landslide risk for those structures and people in those structures. Next slide. Let's see, this guidance area focuses on landslide education, engagement, and outreach. This does touch on the previous two guidance areas, but I like this slide because it focuses on helping educate residents and officials to understand landslide hazards, risks, and the products that may be created to help people understand these hazards. So some of the bullets here, starting on the top one, development of educational outreach and engagement materials. This can be used for leading landslide workshops, maybe making educational material curricula for grade schools or college classes to help them understand landslide hazards, landslide guides for homeowners, or even landslide guides for land use planners, and helping them understand the regional landslide issues. The next bullet, funding can be used to host community landslide engagement opportunities that can help residents learn about landslide hazards and resources. I mean, Mort talked about that, about going out and introducing these hazard mapping products. This might be a good way to fund something like that. So maybe your community makes a hazard map, you host a community event to help residents understand these maps. The third bullet, develop or improve landslide messaging across communities and agencies. This can be used to find effective ways to help your community understand landslide hazards when, for instance, the third atmospheric river in a row is impacting your community. How can your community build messaging that helps residents understand the risk from these storms? Maybe there's a better way to relay those messages. And last bullet, develop new tools and products for increasing awareness of landslide hazards and risk. this touches back on some of the previous bullets. But these last 3 slides are just examples of ideas that kind of get your juices flowing of like maybe things you can do in your community and apply for this grant. But there's definitely many other things that you can do, and I'm happy to chat about those. Next slide, please. The only important thing here is that big green box. For those interested in the grant program, we are in the open application period right now. Started a month ago. There are still 56 days to apply for the grant, which is actually plenty of time. So the rest of the boxes don't really matter. What matters is the time we're in right now, which is that green box. January 15th is the deadline. Next slide, please. Oops, there we go. Some final thoughts. Some things these are questions that have come up in the last year of running this program. When scoping a project, we strongly recommend working with their state geologic survey. Talk to Mort, and especially if you're doing some sort of like inventory, susceptibility, run out mapping. Maybe Mort's too busy to deal with it, but Mort can at least, if you want to hire like a consulting firm to do it, Mort can give them the tools they need to make something that looks similar to what he's already doing. It's nice to have very similar products in the same state. But definitely talk to Mort with any sort of projects like this. We won't consider any long-term projects such as landslide monitoring, warning systems, or instrumentation, just because we can't guarantee that we can give people long-term funding for maintenance and monitoring of these instruments. And we're just kind of staying away from these projects at this point. If applying for a grant, start now, basically. Though you have plenty of time, there's a couple of little tweaks that take a few weeks to go through clearance. So start the process now. And you can fill out sort of the information as needed, but start now to understand the process. And finally, the grant program funding is uncertain beyond fiscal year 2025. So this could be the second and last year of grants. So consider this your call to action to apply now and not put this off until next year. And the next slide and final slide, please. So thank you all for your time. There's a QR code here for the grant program. You can search, USGS landslide grants, and you'll find us usually the first hit. And I actually put the page in the link or the web page in my little chat there. I'll do it again in a second. And that's all I have. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. And thanks. And I'll put the chat. There you go.
Great. Thank you, Stephen, excuse me. Boy, that was a lot of information to go through. But I really appreciate it. I think this is the first time we've been diving into this area with the Learning Network. We do have some questions, and I just encourage all of you who have questions to make sure you ask them today while we have some of the expertise online today. And I also know that we have some folks from various communities that may have been experiencing some of the landslides that were highlighted in the pictures. And so, if you want to share any of your thoughts, and if you don't have a question, but you want to share, some of your thoughts of what you've experienced, or if you've started doing any kind of assessments or working with the state, feel welcome to do that as well. We have about 20 minutes, and I want to go back to a question that looks like it was the first question, and maybe Matt, you can go ahead and, Mort, you can go ahead and respond to this, even though you did in the Zoom. And it's, why does DGGS only look at shallow landslide susceptibility? And this was a question from Kendra. She highlighted and questioned the Glacier View Matanuska Narrows, when I think it's the Matanuska Narrows in particular has the risk of a deep-seated landslide. So I think it'd be good to hear that.
Yeah, you bet. Oh, no, shallow landslides isn't the only thing that we're looking at. This is kind of the first swipe at things that we're doing. We identified there in Haynes that it was the shallow landslide susceptibility that would fit the model of the type of landslides that we're seeing there. I just provided a link of a protocol for deep-seated landslides that Dogami put out in 2016, I want to say, and we're going to be implementing and using this protocol for future landslide mapping. And that the Matanuska Narrows is a perfect example of where we would test that out. Now, again, there are limitations on some of these protocols if we don't have good data, and that data, one of the big things that we need on data, like I mentioned, is LiDAR is the key ingredient on that. But the other one is geology. How good is the geology? How good is the geologic maps that are out there? There's some really poor quality ones. For example, Ketchikan, that just with that landslide that occurred, our largest scale geologic map that we have for Ketchikan is 1 to 250,000. We need better detailed on those soil types, the bedrock types, because that's really going to help our model that we're going to end up displaying on this. So we are exploring the deep-seated landslide protocols on this. This is all new territory for us. And as we work with these communities, these are things that we'll pitch back and forth.
So you mentioned working with Haynes,
That's correct.
right? And what community is like the furthest along in sort of their assessment?
For Haynes. So for Haynes, this occurred immediately after the 2020 landslide that killed those folks. And this is before the landslide hazards program existed at DGGS, is that we were able to get a FEMA CTP grant, the Cooperative Technical Partnership Program grant, and work with those folks to determine an area of interest. And I think it went clear out to, if you guys are familiar with Haynes, out to milepost 12. But the one thing that they really were interested in looking at was future development areas that they wanted to develop. They wanted to know if these areas were potentially high susceptibility for unstable slopes. And if they were, to some regards, this is a stepping tool or item that you can utilize and say, okay, hey, this is an area that we're interested in. There's some areas that we see that's a little vulnerable. What are the next steps? Next steps could be more detailed mapping, maybe hiring a geotech firm to do some investigation and implementing potential mitigation procedures on that. Again, these are tools just to identify the potential hazards that are out there.
Great. I have lots of questions, but I'm going to go for the questions in the chat. So thank you.
You bet.
So Jess Kaiser says, Kaiser Foster has a question here. She's Jess, do you want to ask yourself? I guess I can ask the people who ask it if you want to. I don't have to necessarily read it, but we do that, make it a little more interactive.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much. And yeah, Jess Kaiser Forster here in Deshoe Haynes, working with the Chilkat Indian Village on landslide response. Thanks so much for bringing us together. And yeah, this is awesome. This was for Mort. I was curious because you just kind of said this very quickly regarding LiDAR maps. Is not really your finding aren't appropriate to inform land use and development decisions. I'm curious, like, to what degree do you think we need to get these maps so that decision makers feel comfortable using them? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense.
What's the end goal? And I know with our work in Cluckwan responding to that 23-mile drainage.
Yep.
LiDAR and really the whole Haynes Highway, like LiDAR is seemingly instrumental first step. So it seems like you think that, but where's like, do you guys have an example of any other place, any other state or area that's like, this is what we're trying to get to?
You know, this is new territory for us. Again, like Dogami there in Oregon and Washington has been doing this for some time. And Stephen might be able to amplify on this a little bit. But again, since these aren't really decision making for land use, what it does is it identifies where there's potential hazards and the next steps moving forward on that. And that's going to probably include or involve some kind of geotech firm or some kind of engineering firm where they can stamp these maps and say, okay, these are the next steps moving forward. Being non-regulatory, these are the things that we can provide at this point. You know, as far as what we've done with in the future, I don't know where this is going to go on that, but these are conversations that are going to continue that we have.
And I can add to that I actually started the Landslide program in Washington State before I came to the USGS. And so I'm kind of in the place that Mort was. I was doing that whole thing, trying to figure out what tools were important for land use, people on the ground to understand sort of our hazard maps. And so, you know, LiDAR by itself is a very important tool for what Mort and all state surveys are trying to do as far as inform people about landslide hazards. It's just how you're allowed to use those maps on the ground. But LiDAR is by far the most powerful tool we have right now to help us. Well, next to having landslide geologists, it is the most powerful tool we have to help us make better maps.
Yeah, I appreciate this conversation. You know, I work at the kind of that place between bringing science to decision makers, especially in like the council there in Klukwan. LiDAR has been really helpful, but it is kind of, it's a new place to be in of, yeah, what are the tools to get decision makers and how can they use them? Maybe, I'm not sure. It's an interesting place. So thanks for for addressing the question and the efforts.
And one thing that I think that is important, and as scientists, we don't do a good job in, and maybe this is my chance to twist Mort's arm a little bit, but is to, when we make these tools, these susceptibility maps, you know, where landslides might occur, run out maps where landslides might go, and we often don't provide the users tools. Like, what does this mean to a land use, someone who's a planner? You know, how does a planner use this map? And so I think that's a great sort of, this is a great discussion to sort of help bring the science to all of you and make sure that there's a tool that helps you understand, like there's a map and there's like high hazard, moderate hazard, low hazard. Well, which hazard is the most important one I need to look at when we want to site a school? And so those are some of the things that, you know, as scientists, we don't do a very good job in, and we need to improve that. And we're trying to.
Yeah, I would echo that exactly, Stephen. I mean, those are the conversations that we're trying to form this bridge with this data that we're giving to decision makers. And this bridge isn't there yet. They're caught like, well, what's the next steps? What do you recommend? And we're trying to navigate that, trying to coach folks through that. And ultimately, we don't know all the answers on top of that. You know, but the thing is, I think really the biggest thing that we're trying to do is first and foremost is identify where these hazards are. Then from there, you can identify where the risk is. The risk high or low here, or it's like, yes, that's something we can pay attention to. And that's where the focus should be.
Wow. Well, great. I think, yeah, we have a couple of more questions here. And again, I just encourage any of you, you know, we have time for this conversation. So if you have questions, make sure to ask them. We do have one from Anna. So Anna, do you want to, I see you listed it there, but go ahead and ask it.
Thank you. Thanks, Martin, everyone for putting this together. Along that line, is there already existing or is it under development? There's so much to do here, and you're limited. So first of all, that is there document of sorts that could be made available for local governments or organizations that offers suggestions of like what kind of investments they can do to support your landslide hazard assessments, both the detection of where they are and yeah, their status.
Yeah, no, we don't have any current documentation on that, just as you alluded to, Anna, and good to see you again. Is that, you know, this is new. We're still figuring this out. And these are in fact things that come to light, be like, yes, we need to have this accessible to folks, where that looks like and what that looks like and so forth. One thing I am working on is what we call information circular. They're fact sheets about landslide susceptibility mapping and inventory. It's a front and back page, and what it's toned down to is that people understand the process and the procedures behind that. Because you go to these reports and these maps and you don't have any idea, it's pretty overwhelming, right? I mean, there's a lot, there's science, we're scientists that go into this. This way, when we do provide these maps or these products to the communities, they have this fact sheet that can provide it to the public so they can understand like the whole procedure on that. So those are steps kind of moving forward that we can help with the documentation on that.
Great. And Kenneth, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Melinda. Hi, Anna. Thank you so much for the question. And I didn't properly introduce myself. I'm also a regional geoscience specialist with Tlingit and Haida and with the Kute Landslide project. And being narrow-minded and singularly focused, the largest way that I think that people can get involved is to volunteer to be community scientists, citizen scientists, and assist with the Kuti Landslide project. We need as many, as if we could have as many gadgets up in the mountains as we wanted, there still wouldn't be enough. So that's what outreach, encourage, facilitate volunteering, citizen science. You can involve the entire community with that if you want.
Thank you, Kenneth. I think that that's definitely something that communities can take action on, right? I mean, the whole thing with some of our fast moving impacts that catch us off guard, particularly like landslides or fire or flooding, is what is it, the uncertainty that grows, especially when we've had a impact close to us or in our region, right? And there's a great saying that came out of Canada, and it's something that we've been sharing in a lot of our trainings, and that's action over anxiety, right? Uncertainty brings up oftentimes anxiety, worry. You know that maybe we're heading into, now this, atmospheric river season that may be heightened during different times of the year. And so what's something that, the community can take action on, and that's accessible. That's really accessible. So we have a couple other questions. So Anna, I see your hand is up again. Did you want to respond back to that? I do want to leave a couple more minutes for some of these other questions, but.
Yep, no, it was a different, I'll write a note in the comment. Thank you.
Okay, great. Hopefully we'll get there. So the next one is KK. Do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, thanks. Not really a question, just a comment. Really appreciate all the folks that are contributing landslide information, sharing. It's building education, it's building just awareness. And there's been a huge improvement in the amount of LiDAR and the amount of landslide mapping that's occurring thanks to DGGS and USGS and many others, including the Kute project and the Sitka landslide warning system. But we've really come a long ways in the last 5, 6, 7 years in Southeast Alaska, and it's great. And this is an example of those improvements. So thanks for hosting and all those that are presenting.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for your comments. So Anna, you had another question. You don't have to list it. You can just ask it.
Thank you. I would like to take the opportunity here with this group of people interested in landslides that we got 2 years of NSF funding for a planning project for Arctic T-slip, Arctic Tsunamigenic Slope Instabilities Partnership. So see it as a network of people where we bring together people interested in landslide-generated tsunamis and landslides in general, with various kind of knowledge. It doesn't matter if you have a PhD behind your name, that's just one kind of knowledge and expertise. There's so many other kinds of expertise out there too on this topic. So anyone who's interested in landslide and landslide-generated tsunamis is welcome to join in. And we're just going to start up now in January with webinar series and some in-person community visits and planning for a bigger workshop. And the goal of this planning project is to, at the end in 2026, have a group of research proposals and teams ready to put in research proposals to NSF, so we can ask for more money together than what we typically can to NSF. So think, total of $20 million, maybe even more, that can go to this topic for Alaska. And the foundation is, fundamental science, learning more about this hazard. But in order to do so, do it together and figuring out what people are interested in and what they need, and so on. And it comes down to people stepping up and leading and contributing to make those projects happen.
Great. Thank you, Anna. Yes. Is there anybody else here that has anything else they'd like to share? I know I have a couple of colleagues that are starting to support this effort. I don't know if any of you want to share some perspective, or any of our communities. Just raise your hand.
I can just speak up here. So Ella Newman from the Sitka Sound Science Center put in the chat a link to the Southeast Alaska Landslide Working Group. And that's been going on. That's been a group that's been together for a few months. And we've got calls every month. You can go, she's got that link. Ella, can you put that link back in the chat?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you,
Great.
Allison.
Great. There's calls every month. You can sign up to be on the mailing list, and then also there will be a in-person workshop in March next year. So that's a great group to tie in with. And again, it's not just for researchers, it's for first responders, community members, anybody who's interested in learning more about landslides in Southeast Alaska. So
Great.
And we really would like more tribal
for that
input.
is, sorry, so the next meeting for that is tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. And please check out our Discord, our Substack, and email with any questions. Thanks so much.
Great. It's right there in the chat. Somebody else was about to share something?
Oh, I was just saying that we really would love more tribal input in that group.
Great. Yes. I hope everybody heard Lindsay. Tribal input. Well, to that end, I have a couple of things I just want to share, from our role here is, we are affiliated with the Tribal Climate Resilience Program, and that's under BIA. And of course, they come out with an annual call for proposals and for getting assessments done. And I think, hearing the amount of technical assessments that need to happen, or in addition to that, or perhaps as a place to start, what Kenneth had mentioned is citizen science. And so you can look at that funding source as a potential for building out focuses on either of those areas, assessment or building out a citizen science project. I can't say the exact program, but I did just attend a STEM learning project that's funded by NASA, and NASA has quite a bit under citizen science. And then, of course, wants their information accessible and user-friendly, and they want the public to use it. So I'd encourage you to look at potential NASA funding and maybe just Google citizen science and see what's available there. But I just encourage, one of the things that we notice, and that's very interesting in running these webinars and information sessions, is that the technical information is where we see people showing up. And it's definitely an area that we have to bring each other along in, whether it's applying for that big regional funding and having people learn together, and various approaches to research, which Anna mentioned, or whether it's, citizen science. Some of this stuff is we're all learning together. So, and we need all perspectives, which Lindsay mentioned, tribal perspectives, as well as some of the expertise in our agencies and organizations. So I don't see any other questions, no other hands raised, but I'm really happy that we at least got started focusing on this area and highlighting some of the issues that people are dealing with and facing. So here's the end of our slides, and we just want to wish you all a happy Native American Heritage Month. Of course, we encourage you to definitely get to know the communities that you're working with, the tribes you're working with, and whose traditional lands you are on, as well as share that if you're coming from our own perspective as Indigenous people. And know that we have a few forthcoming activities happening across Alaska. Many of you are aware of them and are going to participate in them. And just know that we are a resource, and we hope to see you at our next information session. So thank you very much to Kenneth, Mort, and Stephen for your presentations today and your presence. Have a good day. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good day. Thanks for having us.
Yes.
Thanks so